Hey, this is Tom from MVP Chess. Welcome back to my series on Bobby Fischer's seminal work, My 60 Memorable Games. In this video, we'll be analyzing game number 25 that Fischer played versus William Lombardi in the U.S. Chess Championship in 1961. You're not going to want to miss Fischer break down the dreaded Maroczy Bind. Before we jump into the analysis, don't forget to smash that subscribe button and join Team MVP. Thanks for your support. So, William Lombardi was an American grandmaster. In 1957, he became the first U.S. citizen since Steinitz to win a world chess title. He won the World Chess Junior Championship with a perfect score, 11-0. Lombardi also famously was Fischer's second during his 1972 championship match versus Boris Spassky. So let's jump into this encounter. Pawn e4, Fischer goes the Sicilian, of course. Knight f3, d6, d4, open Sicilian on the board. After knight c3, Fischer undoubtedly would have played pawn to a6, going for his beloved Najdorf variation. But instead, Lombardi plays f3, a move that Fischer called a passive, undeveloping move. So we'll see Lombardi's idea in just a second. After knight c6, c4, e6, knight c3, we have the Maroczy Bind pawn structure where white is really trying to prevent this freeing break pawn to d5. So this can be really difficult to play on the black side. If you don't get one of these freeing advances, either d5 or b5 in, your position becomes very cramped and you can just suffocate under the space. So let's see how Fischer decided to combat this dreaded opening. Bishop e3, of course, Fischer quickly castles his king and now is ready to play this pawn advance d5. So that's why Lombardi drops the knight back so that the queen can influence the d5 square. Now, of course, this is time consuming. Moving the same piece again. The light square bishop is still undeveloped, which means Lombardi's king is still in the center. So that's why Fischer strikes immediately with pawn to d5. Boom. He gets this freeing advance in. It is a pawn sacrifice. However, Fischer has full compensation because of his lead in development. So Lombardi plays principally by accepting the pawn, and Fischer avoids the exchange of queens in this position and plays queen c7. Good move. Fischer doesn't want to exchange queens here. He wants to use this queen that's moved prematurely in the opening as a target to accelerate his development and create concrete threats. So Lombardi does his best to get the queen out of dodge. He plays queen b5, moving the queen off the open d-file and lending some support to this pawn on b2. Fischer said this was way too materialistic. Okay, Lombardi should have been in damage control mode at this point and looked to get the king out of the center with bishop e2. Fischer gives this line where he could have given this intermediate check and after castles grabbed this pawn on b2 with equality. So this would definitely have been Lombardi's best continuation. Instead, he tried to hang on to the pawn. Understandable, but this really allowed Fischer to develop quickly and create some serious threats in the position. So he starts by playing bishop d7. Great move. Notice how Fischer's rooks are now connected. His development is complete. Meanwhile, Lombardi is still lagging behind in development. So, Fischer's got some threats in the position, such as knight b4, right? Moving this knight, attacking the queen with a discovered attack. So, Lombardi plays rook c1, trying to take prophylactic measures against this move. So, it's black to play here. I will turn it over to you in this position. What did Fischer play here? If you've been watching the series, you also know I'm not only a fan of Bobby Fischer, but also of former U.S. chess champion Sam Shankland, who says if there's a key idea in the position and your opponent has prevented it, the first question you should always ask yourself is, what happens if I play it anyway? And that's exactly what Fischer did here. Knight b4 anyway. Boom. Great move. After knight takes b4, we see Fischer's idea. He can just temporarily sacrifice the queen and win the exchange. So Fischer gives a little check to weaken the kingside structure and drops the bishop back. So the smoke has cleared from that nice shot knight b4. So let's take stock of the position. So Fischer is up the exchange. However, as compensation, Lombardi has an extra pawn and this really nice knight on d5 that's on a really nice outpost. Notice there's no pawn on the e file or the c file that can contest this knight. Fischer doesn't have a light squared bishop anymore, so it can be difficult to dislodge his piece. So even though Fischer has a material advantage in this position, even though he's managed to break down the Maroczy Bind, he still has a difficult task ahead of him, in terms of winning the game. So let's see what happened. Both players continue with development. Lombardi developing his bishop, Fischer bringing his rook to the open c file. And after bishop c3, activating the bishop on the long diagonal and blocking Fischer's activity on the c file, Fischer plays an instructive move here. Pawn to f5. He's looking to undermine the support of this strong knight on d5. Lombardi pushes on with e5, which allows Fischer to bring his rook to the active square c5 and challenge this knight. Lombardi drops the knight back, and Fischer puts maximum pressure on the queen side. But after a3 takes, and rook d5, Fischer moves his rook to safety, grabs the open file, but notice this rook doesn't really, after king e2, have any squares to infiltrate. Okay, Fischer's extra exchange, after he centralizes his king, his extra exchange on c8 is really hemmed in by this blockading bishop on c3. So it's really difficult for Fischer to break through in this position. So after rook c5, Fischer notes that in order to win this position, he's going to have to look for an opportune moment to either sacrifice on b4 or maybe sacrifice on e5. Okay, cash in his extra exchange to equalize material, but hope that his superior king activity will count and superior rook activity. So Fischer says Lombardi here should have just played rook a1, tickled his pawn on a7, and after a6, rook g1, just defer back to Fischer, suggesting, I've got a fortress, it's really difficult for you to break through, what are you going to do? Instead, in this position, Lombardi committed a terrible blunder. He played rook e1. So, it is now black to win in this position. Pause your videos and have a think, how did Fischer bring home the bacon in this position? So anytime you're in an endgame, you always need to evaluate transpositions and liquidations into a king and pawn ending. And that's specifically what Fischer did here. He saw that after rook takes c3, boom, great move. Be sure to drop a comment if you found this one. Congratulations. He saw that he had a completely winning king and pawn ending. So why is this winning? Well, two factors. One is the relative activity of the kings. Fischer brings his king into Lombardi's house, all up in his grill. Great king activity. Much more active than Lombardi's king, which is completely passive on the second rank. And now we see the second factor. Fischer is able to, after the move a5, create an outside pass pawn. After exhausting Lombardi's reserve tempi, he plays the move a5. And this game is basically over. Lombardi captures, and Fischer is basically going to use this pawn on a5 as a diversion, as a decoy. Force the white king to come and stop it, and then go and clean up on the king side. So Lombardi plays king b2, a4, king a3, king takes c3, and now Fischer is just going to march the king over to the king side and collect these pawns. And in this position, Lombardi resigned. Wow. What a clinical win by Fischer. Okay. He made sure to get that freeing d5 advance in to break the Maroczy bind. And from there, he had to be opportunistic. Okay. Looking for a way to give back some of the material he won for positional factors. And unfortunately, Lombardi blundered with e1. After losing a game like this, Lombardi did what any normal chess player would do. He quit competitive chess and became a Catholic priest. So I hope you've enjoyed this analysis of game number 25. Be sure to slam that subscribe button, join Team MVP. You're not going to want to miss my next installment, game number 26, where we look at another game Fischer played against an American, this time the great Samuel Reshevsky. I will see you then. Have a great day.